Shabbat Shalom, Ambazonia. People of the United Nations Trust Territory of the British Southern Cameroons. Good morning. Happy Saturday. Ambazonia Defense Forces and the Restoration Forces on Ground Zero chants Seseko, the president, as they celebrate Ambazonian Independence Day. Today, na number 5 day for the month of October 2019. My name na Capo Daniel. This one na my daily podcast for una. In an unprecedented show of unity and solidarity to the Ambazonian leadership in jail, Ambazonian forces and population led by the ADF and the Restoration Forces pays loyalty and chanted Seseko, their president, as they celebrate their Independence Day. Seseko Ayoktabi, the interim president of the IG group, is in jail in captivity following his kidnapping from Nigeria by La République du Cameroon. Effective prosecution of our revolution to take full advantage to the things that are rational have seen the governing council of Ambazonia and the interim government linking up to make sure that we do what it takes to put our nation first, projecting Seseko Ayoktabi, who is in captivity as the Mandela of Ambazonia, while allowing the effective leadership based on competence of Ayabacho Lucas, who is clearly the most outstanding, charismatic, revolutionary leader we have in safety, is the right thing to do. It's time for Ambazonia to put Ambazonia first and do the right thing. There is no more excuse for Ambazonia to allow themselves to be scammed and conned anymore. We have seen the troops who are on the ground. We have seen the leadership of those generals who have organized the Independence Day parade. Our revolution have greatly been set back and bestowed by people who have deceived Ambazonians and shifted needed resources the past year away from these major forces that we have come to see. Ambazonia at large have made mistake and shifted their resources from these major biggest groups that we have seen on the ground, from the ADF to the BSCRF to the Restoration Forces loyal to Seseko Ayoktabi. The same mistake should not be allowed to happen again. All the forces on the ground have to unite around these generals that we have seen. We must push for a platform that brings these generals together to have a collective unified command structure. Previously, all these generals we have seen today were successfully brought together in the coalition forces that forms a contender force, but was dismissed and undermined by infiltrators and power mongers. We must not allow anything, for whatsoever reason, to stand in between these generals that we have seen on the ground. The same will apply for those who have provided the political leadership that have seen Ambazonia building that capacity to mobilize themselves in this formation that we have seen. But first, prisoners of conscience are being released all over the Cameroons as Mr. Biya succumbed to international pressure and realized that he has limits to his power and the things he can do and the things he cannot do. Mr. Biya cannot possibly criminalize Ambazonian nationality and arrest all the 8 million Ambazonians who consider themselves as such and campaign for separation. Douala have seen the release of 45 Ambazonians, prisoners of conscience, who claims they are innocent except for the crime of being Ambazonians. Some other 148 Ambazonians detainees have been released from Biya Central prisons. The list of the 333 prisoners of conscience that are going to be released have further give evidence of what we have been saying all along. Mr. Biya have been using Ambazonians in jail to act as proxy forces, committing atrocities in Ambazonia and acting scenes in propaganda video to be used to tarnish the image of Ambazonia fighters. Awak Hang Liu one of the fake Amba boys who were presented in the so-called dialogue in Yaoundé as an ex-Ambazonia fighters, appears on the list of 333 prisoners to be released, which means that he was one of those who were awaiting trial for armed robbery charges, who were recruited and being used to stage scene of atrocity across Ambazonia and involvement in kidnapping for ransom in order to turn the Ambazonia population against the struggle and cause chaos in Ambazonia. A lot of people are coming up recognizing some of the faces that have been paraded in Yaoundé as Amba boys, including one Aga Romeo, who is a nephew of Aga Robinson, a Cameroon army general. Some of them have been identified as people who do not even live in the so-called Anglophone regions. These fake Amba boys have been used as a gang of Turk to cause chaos and promote a reign of terror amongst the Ambazonian population by Aitanganji Paul, who created this group as proxy forces to use to tarnish the image of the Ambazonian fighters. A remnant of these forces are currently operating around the area of Mpining to Mundankwe. According to information on Ground Zero, there are about 20 of them in number. Some of them have bulletproof vests. These fake Amba boys go around breaking into houses, terrorizing the people, actually forcing them to violate the ghost town every Monday and open up shops. This further reveals who they are really working for. These are the forces believed to have murdered the warden Ayafo Florence. For another side, the fate of Mr. Biya Bivondo may end up being a prisoner in the international criminal system. This decam as major newspaper, the Washington Post, it then published a report from the Global Center for the Responsibility to Protect, underlining the great danger for mass atrocity by Cameroon government in Ambazonia. The Washington Post talks even though the Ambazonian independent fighters and the Cameroon government then both then commit atrocities, but the Cameroon government then perpetrate crime against humanity, which is well documented in a report with evidence that was co-authored by the Cameroon-based Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa and Raoul Welberg's Center for Human Rights. The report says there are evidence that the Cameroon army, as policy and war tactics, have used systematic torching of entire villages to the ground, with more than 220 villages already wiped out and more than 500,000 people being forced away from their homes by such actions. These have put at risk 1.3 million people in Ambazonia. The evidence of this crime is sufficient enough to make a referral by the United Nations Security Council to the International Criminal Court to investigate the Cameroon government led by Mr. Biya for crimes against humanity. This as more and more international personalities such as Kenneth Ruth, Nessa Wingler, Ifat Rahman, and many other UN trusted organizations are calling for an intervention by the United Nations Security Council. All this, they come at a time when South Africa will be chairing the United Nations Security Council. These are all the panic button that has led Mr. Biya to release prisoners, including the recent announcement of the people of Maurice Kamto being released as well, alongside the Ambazonian prisoners of conscience. Mr. Biya might have used the so-called national dialogue to evade the United Nations General Assembly focus on the Ambazonian crisis. With the increased pressure from the international community, the writing is on the wall for Mr. Biya. Sooner or later, he will soon realize his limit and may end up like other dictators before him, like Omar Bashir, behind bars. Back to Amba. Ambazonians, having watched the display of nationalism and patriotism in this year's Independence Day celebration, should not fall for any scam and con men again. We now know who controls Ground Zero, and the various generals who have demonstrated leadership in organizing Independence Day parade will definitely be on the focus of Ambazonians' mind as they go about supporting the resistance in Ground Zero. Any fundraiser who does not recognize or prioritize the measure groups as we have seen on this National Day parade should be considered as scam. Ambazonia should focus on sponsoring these measure groups that have demonstrated without a doubt that they are disciplined and can bring order in ground zero should be encouraged and supported so that those ancillary groups can come around them and be more disciplined. All the smaller ancillary groups, such as the Pythons and the remnant of the so-called county forces that were created by Sako, should shine their eye and join the most effective forces that have demonstrated a patriotic outlook of nationalism in the Ambazonian War for Independence. Those who have tried to destroy the coalition forces of the contender force should come together and support the National Defense Council of the coalition forces and the contender force for an effective prosecution of the war. Bloggers who seek to replace the National Defense Council of the coalition forces are doing so, undermining the prosecution of Ambazonian War for Independence. Those who, for personal vendetta in the diaspora, holding forces hostages as personal properties, are doing so at the peril of Ambazonian independence. Competence and visionaries have no replacement or substitute. We discourage people using financial power to sway loyalties on ground zero and further making it difficult for effective prosecution of the war. Generals and their forces should wise up and work together as one for effective prosecution of the war. We have seen the political leadership, the display of loyalty to Seseko Ayok Tabi, and the effective and charismatic leadership of Ayabacho Lucas. We encourage this unity as the base for a platform that will bring a collaborative projection of a single command structure, both for diplomacy and ground zero military projection. Bloggers and activists should allow leaders to lead, and other leaders who are not so competent or have not been effective to mobilize the resources on ground zero and in diplomacy should follow the lead of those leaders who are more competent. Otherwise, the Bible prophecy that pride comes before a fall will befall us all. Smaller ones should be humble to join and enforce the bigger ones for a more effective prosecution of our war. We must rise up as one man to respect the Independence Day goes down every Monday. We must resist and fight until independence is achieved. We must not compromise the aspiration of our people. May our revolution be short. May our independence, democracy, and freedom in Ambazonia be forevermore. God bless you. Capo Daniel signing off.
Yeah.